Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Christina Rose, Director of Strategic Alliances at Foundation Source, and I will be facilitating today's webinar discussing how private foundation tools can be leveraged to support social action causes and initiatives. Today's topic was born out of conversations we have had these past few months with our clients, their advisors, and many existing foundations. The question we keep hearing is, what can we do? We are in the midst of a challenging time in the US and around the world, dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and the groundswell of calls for racial equity and social justice. I know we are all seeking out ways to be of service. So what can foundations do to tackle complex systemic problems? Thanks to the unique capabilities of a private foundation, the answer is quite a lot, actually. And we will talk more about this in the next hour. With that in mind, before we get started, I want to send my best wishes to you, your families, and your communities. For anyone not familiar with our firm, Foundation Source is the nation's largest provider of comprehensive support services for private foundations. Our services include administrative support, active compliance monitoring, tax and legal expertise, online management tools, and philanthropic advisory services. Moderating today's discussion is Stephanie Borsari, National Director for Client Services. She will be joined by Ann Vincent and Matt DeRigo of the Claire Rose Foundation, along with Foundation Source's Legal Services Director, Jana Varicchio, and Christine Bowles, Senior Private Client Advisor. It's a pleasure to have them with us today to talk about how foundations are supporting their communities in this unprecedented time of need. We will formally introduce them in a moment, but first, a few points to note before I turn it over to Stephanie. A quick word about Wi-Fi and phone connections. Probably like most of you, we are all working remotely. We don't anticipate any technical issues during the broadcast, but if one of us loses connection, just know we will quickly get it resolved and resume the webinar. If you experience problems, you can try exiting and then rejoining the broadcast. Also, audio may be better via phone than on the computer. It will also reduce some strain on your Wi-Fi connection. Questions can be submitted at any time via the GoToWebinar dashboard on your screen. We will be leaving some time at the end of today's presentation to address your questions. If we do not have time to answer all of your questions, please know we will follow up with you directly after the webinar. In the handout section of the dashboard, you will find 3 white papers on the topics that we will be discussing today: grants to individuals, impact investing, and awarding scholarships. You can download them as an additional reference beyond today's webinar. And now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Stephanie Borsari. Stephanie heads up Foundation Source's Client Services Department, a team comprised of 37 private client advisors. The private client advisors are the relationship managers who support our 1,600 plus clients directly with the management, administration of the private foundations, and help facilitate their access to and engagement with the full array of service offerings and private foundation experts at Foundation Source. Stephanie has been with Foundation Source for 13 years and is a proven leader and practiced philanthropy professional. She has spent her entire career in the nonprofit sector and has been in leadership fundraising positions at community-based dance company and an academic medical center and a private university. And with that, Stephanie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christy. Thanks for the introduction. I send a very special greeting out to our current clients who are on the line with us, and I extend a warm welcome to all of the existing foundations who are not yet Foundation Source clients and your advisors who are also joining us. It's a nice mixed crowd today. It is so fun to participate in these webinars that highlight the work that Foundation Source clients are doing. And as head of client services, I get to hear about a lot of our clients' creativity, passion, and commitment. And it's absolutely my joy to share that more broadly with today's audience. So today I am joined by 4 marvelous people. Christy's already mentioned them. I'd like to, at this point, invite everybody to turn on their webcam so we can see your faces while we introduce you. Hello, 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 everybody. Ann Vincent is the president of the Claire Rose Foundation, a small family foundation founded by her mother. Ann is deeply committed to the values of trust-based philanthropy And she works very closely with the nonprofit partners the foundation supports and fosters supportive relationships with leaders and staff. The foundation's focus is on building the capacity of nonprofit organizations through the administration of the Fieldstone Leadership Network San Diego and the Creative Youth Development Initiative. As a former social worker, Anne brings compassion and empathy to her work. At home in Encinitas, California, she's an avid runner and tries to keep up with her 2 children and her Bernese mountain dog. Anne, thank you so much for joining us today. Matt Dorigo is the Director of Creative Youth Development, acronym CYD, for the Claire Rose Foundation in San Diego, California. His role is to make direct investments in CYD organizations and to increase awareness, resources, and opportunities for the field of CYD. The Claire Rose Foundation is the lead funder and driver of the San Diego CYD network, helping to strengthen the field locally, regionally, and nationally by building the capacity of organizations and their leaders, coalition building, advocacy, grant making, and hands-on technical support. Matt also holds leadership positions on the National Partnership for Creative Youth Development, Create Justice, and Art Equals Opportunity. He is co-founder of Arts Amplifying Youth and sits on the Arts Ed Impact Group for Grant Makers for Education. Matt, welcome. Anne and Matt, yesterday's preparation meeting gave us just a taste of what we're in for. And audience, I promise you, you are in for a treat to hear from these two on behalf of the Claire Rose Foundation. As Legal Services Director at Foundation Source, Jana Verricchio provides support to foundations and their advisors on a range of issues, including grants to individuals, program-related investing, international grant making, scholarship and awards programs, and direct charitable activities. Jana collaborates with the company's clients to develop and achieve their philanthropic goals while remaining in compliance with self-dealing, excess business holdings, jeopardizing investments, and taxable expenditure rules. She breaks it down and makes it sound much more simple than I think I just did by reading this bio. Foundation Source Senior Private Client Advisor, Christine Bowles, manages the Foundation Source relationships with a diverse and active client portfolio, striving to ensure that her clients have a world-class experience throughout their engagement with Foundation Source. She facilitates the delivery of services and offerings as her clients need, request, and as she intuits, collaborating with colleagues across the company and all departments to do so. Jana, Christine, you're both incredible colleagues and knowledgeable professionals, and I'm so glad for your participation today. Thank you so much. At this point, let's check out what the next hour is going to look like. We'll talk briefly about what we mean by social action. I'll introduce 10 tools that private foundations can use to address social and institutional problems that extend beyond direct grants to 501c3 public charities. Then we'll discuss 3 specific social action tactics that Foundation Source clients have utilized. For each, I'll provide a high-level and brief overview. My 4 guests have been invited to contribute to the conversation about one of these 3 types of initiatives based on their own particular knowledge and personal and professional experience. And then time permitting, we'll open for Q&A. Please note that questions that are submitted for Anne and Matt will be prioritized. And as Christy pointed out, any questions that we are unable to answer today will be reviewed and responded to after the webinar. There are a lot of concepts being mentioned today, and we are only focusing discussion time on the 3 of them. So throughout the webinar, and as Christy pointed out in the attachments section of the control panel, you will see recommended Foundation Source white papers that provide more detail and information. From my part, those will be represented as screenshots of the publications on each relevant slide. All of those publications are available on foundationsource.com at our resource library, as well as many others. And current clients, you may access those attachments as well as other materials on the gated client portal in the knowledge source section. Just check with your private client advisor if you're not sure how to get there. So, all right, let's get to it. Let me first acknowledge that although I am a concerned and compassionate citizen of the world, I am not a social action expert. So to break this topic down into really super simple and straightforward terms, I took my mom's age-old advice. if I wanted to understand a word or a concept better, and I looked it up in the dictionary. Merriam-Webster defines social action as being an organized program of socioeconomic reform, and more specifically, an activity on the part of an interested group towards some particular institutional change. There are a great many foundation source clients that seek to get to the root of social issues and to address complex systematic problems in order to fix and prevent them, and therefore influence real institutional change throughout their foundations. We've got clients that are working to bring about fundamental sustainable change within the judicial system in the state of Connecticut, with the Colorado foster care system, to close the achievement gap that faces low-income and minority students, to give voice to victims of domestic violence, to prevent suicide by U.S. veterans, and to fight climate change through energy efficiency. Nearly all foundation source clients, as a part of their philanthropic portfolios, make grants directly to public charities. And there are also quite a few clients that engage in other types of investment and philanthropic activities without actually making any grants at all to US-based 501c3 public charities. And that's entirely possible due to the flexibility that a private foundation vehicle provides. This list that you're looking at now comes from our publication, 10 Things You Didn't Know That You Could Do With Your Foundation. And direct charitable activities, PRIs, international grant making, programmatic expenses, impact investing, and grants to individuals are the tools that foundation source clients most often deploy, some of them quite frequently and regularly. For example, a current example of this is our grants to individuals program, which have absolutely skyrocketed due to the COVID-19 health crisis and the resulting current economic environment. Between March and June, foundation source clients distributed 10 times the number of grants to individuals as during the same time frame in 2019. Today, we're only able to focus on 2 of the specific strategies listed here: impact investments and grants to individuals. We'll also discuss scholarships as a strategy for influencing social action, which of course also can have a direct grants to individuals approach. So let's start with impact investing, which is where a private foundation uses its endowment funds to influence a positive social or environmental impact in addition to generating a financial return. There are several approaches to impact investing that range from fiscally conservative to financially risky. They're listed here, and today the approach that we will highlight is mission-related investing. Foundations that engage in MRIs make investments that generate financial returns while providing social benefits. They might buy stock in well-established companies that are aligned with the foundation's mission. They might put money into a social investment fund or even be an angel investor in a startup company that has a social mission. Foundation Source even has several clients that are committed with their entire investment portfolio to 100% impact investing, and MRIs are certainly a key piece of those portfolios. Now, we will hear from a Foundation Source client that has made mission-related investing a standard practice in their foundations. Christine, I'd like to invite you to join us as, hi. Unfortunately, the principals, of the Binden Foundation, Lisa Halstead and Scott Halstead, were unable to join us today. But I will tell you, they had to be several hours in helping to prepare us for this webinar and to represent them. So Christine is the relationship manager that currently works with the Binden Foundation to facilitate all of Foundation Source's services and offerings that they use. So Christine, thanks so much for stepping in for Lisa and Scott.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's really my pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited to share the Binden Foundation's story with everybody.
Well, tell us about them. I mean, you've been working with them just about since the beginning of their relationship with Foundation Source.
Yes, so Lisa and Scott Halstead, again, as Stephanie mentioned, the principals of the Binden Foundation, came to us in 2015 for help with establishing their foundation. Lisa is a successful entrepreneur, having founded and managed one of the leading businesses in adventure travel and community service for teens. Scott has had a long career in the financial services industry, specifically investing in and building startups in the healthcare arena. So Scott and Lisa have 4 grown children, 3 girls, excuse me, and one boy. And I say this because raising 3 girls really played a role in the development of the foundation's mission early on. Excuse me. The foundation has a very well-defined mission, focusing in 4 key areas: empowering women, fighting human trafficking, improving the environment, and providing health care in low-resource communities. And primarily all this support is outside of the US.
So in addition to the fact that they're parents, particularly of 3 girls, what else contributed to the development of that mission?
So I guess I will speak for all of us. When we support an organization, whether it's monetarily or through volunteer service, we tend to gravitate towards organizations that are doing good work in the areas that pull on our heartstrings. So Lisa and Scott, of course, did that, but they also feel that for themselves, their interest came from their work and their personal experience. So they feel that for themselves, it was really important to focus on areas in which they had a lot of experience. So they feel that bringing that knowledge to the table really has added great value, and thereby increasing the impact that they're making. So with respect to empowering women, the empowering women prong of their mission, Lisa spent a lot of time traveling through her business in Africa and South America, and seeing firsthand that women were typically the members of the family providing for the families, working the hardest, getting the most done, but the men were typically the ones that were controlling their independence. So as a result, the Halsteads feel that it's really important to empower women financially, thereby building their independence and their self-esteem, and those two things kind of feed off each other.
Yeah, I could see how they probably self-esteem leads to financial independence, and financial independence improves self-esteem. We invited the Binden Foundation specifically to participate on the topic of mission-related investments, because they've been really focused on this type of tool and method of deploying the foundation's capital, and certainly to carry out some of the initiatives that you've just described. What can you tell us on their behalf about the foundation's experience with and their approach to mission-related investing?
Sure. So while the foundation does make some straight grants to 501c3 public charities, the foundation primarily views its philanthropy through the lens of social impact investing. So again, the Halsteads do make the straight grants, and they feel that straight grants do have their place, but they prefer to invest in small businesses that align with the foundation's mission while providing a financial return. As Scott discussed with us, their focus on impact investing is really rooted in their belief of the efficiency of capitalism as a means to force organizations, and even those with social missions, to allocate their resources in a manner that will produce the greatest return for stakeholders. So this doesn't mean, though, that a mission-related business has to maximize profits. But it does need to manage its affairs, its affairs prudently in order to get the biggest bang for the buck. So as Scott so eloquently wrote to us, and I'm going to actually read what he wrote to us because I can't say it better. Applying rigorous business management is a healthy dynamic that will ultimately lead to greater social impact, because it creates a long-term sustainable model that's not dependent on the whims of philanthropic donors. So he went on to say that it's extremely difficult for an enterprise to plan and execute long-term goals when it's relying on annual fundraising. So additionally, he said that, Impact Investing affords a foundation the opportunity to recycle their assets, thereby stretching a philanthropic dollar into multiple dollars. They shared a lot on this particular topic. They also shared that there have been numerous studies that show that impact investors can generate a market rate of return while also achieving their social impact goals. There does not need to be a trade-off between the two.
Can you share a couple of examples?
I would love to share a couple of examples. So both of these examples are mission-related investments that the foundation made. They are both with for-profit companies. The first one is All Across America, which is a for-profit company that currently employs 3,000 women in Rwanda, Ghana, and Kenya. These women weave baskets and vases and other wares while earning a living wage. And actually, these products are then ultimately sold here in the U.S. at some pretty big retailers. For instance, Costco, West Elm, and Anthropology. So it's pretty cool. The other MRI investee that I'd like to talk about is called Kasha. Again, another for-profit enterprise. And Kasha provides women in Rwanda and Kenya with personal hygiene products that the women can order discreetly from their phones. Those products are then distributed by a network of women, also earning a living wage, while at the same time supporting the health needs of their community.
Awesome stuff.
It's beautiful. I know, it's awesome.
It is. I love it. How does the foundation identify where it will invest?
So Scott and Lisa shared with us, Stephanie, and I know you'll remember that the social impact investing world is relatively mature at this point. The flagship event for people interested in this space, it's called SOCAP, Social Capital Markets, and it's held each fall in San Francisco. The foundation has also joined membership networks that focus on impact investing. To name a few, Tonic Network, Renew, 1 to 4 is another one that they're a member of. It's also pointed out that the key to finding good opportunities is to really narrow the focus. As I've mentioned, the foundation is very clear where it focuses its support in terms of social goals and also geography. And it really deviates from that mission on rare exception. So the narrow scope of the foundation's mission also helps Scott and Lisa to easily weed through opportunities that fall outside of that scope. They also pointed out that the narrow focus, they believe, has helped the network to grow deeper rather than wider.
Thank you. And audience, I'll just ask you that if you are looking for the names of those organizations, drop us a note in the questions so we know to get back to you and provide those specific names. Christine, I've been asking this question of a lot of our clients lately, and we get varied answers here and to a couple of the others that I'll pose. But I'd love to know, and I think the audience would, to get an understanding as to how the events of 2020 affect this foundation's behavior and activity.
Sure. So the foundation knew early on that its focus would be on social action outside of the U.S. And as I've mentioned, it really does rely on that mission as a framework. So the recent activities in the U.S. have not impacted the foundation particularly. However, that said, specifically related to COVID, the foundation has chosen to support some local programs, for example, healthcare clinics in their area. But again, still staying within the framework of the mission, providing healthcare to underserved communities.
And of course, that's drawing on Scott's professional experience and Lisa's professional experience in marrying the two.
Yeah.
How about this one that I've also been asking clients, and this one we're getting really a varied range of responses. So how will the Binden Foundation adjust its spending plans for the remainder of the year? Will they? And if so, how?
So fortunately for the foundation, because of the performance of the public markets, the foundation's assets have actually increased this year, thereby allowing the foundation to accelerate its support through impact investing and also grants, while maintaining the long-term health of the foundation. So Lisa and Scott really expect to continue to support their existing investees, in fact, increasing that support and hopefully bringing on some new opportunities.
You know, especially in this time frame where so much is fluid and nuanced, it's really interesting to see and hear how our clients are flexing and where they won't, especially considering the Binden Foundation does have such a narrow focus to which they adhere.
Mm-hmm.
Have they shared with us whether and what would be non-negotiable priorities for the foundation?
So I don't think that Lisa and Scott have any non-negotiable priorities. However, they do want to remain focused, on their mission, of course. And as long as they continue to see good opportunities, that will further the foundation's mission, they will remain flexible in the means to that end.
They're really, really intentional, right? Both in their philanthropy and really intentional about pursuing the mission-related investing as part of their philanthropic as well as asset investment activity. And they even started their foundation knowing they were going to pursue that as a tactic. What lessons did the foundation learn, especially in pursuit of mission-related investing?
So the one thing that the foundation shared with us that they did learn, or that Scott and Lisa learned early on, was to look around the table when they're sitting down, for an opportunity, or not literally sitting down, but look around the table and see who they are aligning themselves with. They've learned who the key players are, who the reputable, investors are, and by paying attention to that, they've really, it really has enabled them to get the outcome that they want from each of these opportunities.
And what is the outcome? How do they hope the Binden Foundation will provide a positive impact?
So at the end of the day, they really have to rely on quantitative metrics. For instance, how many women are earning a living wage, how many individuals are getting their basic health care needs met, how many children are being saved or rescued from slavery. And they really expect their investees to monitor and report on these metrics.
Got it. Thank you. Since they're not here to add anything themselves, is there anything that Lisa and Scott asked you to share with us?
There is something that Lisa and Scott really wanted me to impress on the audience today, that you don't need to be intimidated and you don't need a large foundation in order to make a difference. The Binden Foundation is relatively small with an annual granting budget of roughly $100,000, and they've made an incredible impact. So that is the one thing they really wanted me to share.
Yeah. Again, so rewarding to see the work that we do behind the scenes play out with the foundation. Thank you, Christine, so much for representing them so well. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to move on to the grants to individuals component of this webinar. If I can get us off, there we go. There are several general requirements that dictate grants being made to individuals. They must be made for a charitable purpose, for example, to advance education or to provide funding to someone in danger of eviction due to missed rent or mortgage payments. Those grants must be made available to a broad charitable class, which is considered a group of individuals that's large and open-ended. Such an example would be victims of the COVID-19 pandemic and all future disasters, where a too narrow definition would be patients currently admitted to a specific hospital. And as would be expected, foundation insiders are not eligible for receiving such grants. The foundation must align grants with criteria related to the grant's actual purpose. So, for example, the foundation cannot give preference to somebody with brown hair when making grants meant to alleviate financial hardship. These things are just simply not related. And of course, grant selection must be made objectively and without discrimination. And lastly, the foundation must keep records of the grant details and associated documentation, such as applications and reports. There are two types of grants to individual programs. Anytime a grant has strings attached to it, like requirements that the funds must be used for a particular purpose, use travel, study, research as examples. The IRS requires that they have the approval of the program in advance of such grants being made. And Foundation Source has a lot of experience here. We've worked with many clients to develop their programs and to request and receive such approval from the IRS. Grants can also be made to individuals without strings attached. Those are where funds are granted to be used for whatever the individual deems to be their most urgent need. Private foundations can make these grants specifically to relieve human suffering due to emergencies, disasters, medical situations, and during times of particular hardship. And as I mentioned, we've seen here at Foundation Source this kind of grant skyrocket in the last handful of months. And Claire Rose was one of our early adopters of this program during that time frame. They made the second type of grant, the one meant to address urgent need, and that has no strings attached. So let's hear from them. Delighted to introduce you again to Ann Vincent, President, and Matt Dorigo, Director of Creative Youth Development for the Claire Rose Foundation. And you all have been a client for about a dozen years. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to talk with you. As the Claire Rose's first private client advisor, when the foundation joined us in 2008, I remember the foundation being among one of our quieter foundations. There's been a dramatic evolution. And now I think we would describe the Claire Rose Foundation as being among our very active and sophisticated, and as well now, thanks to Matt and another colleague I know, a professionally staffed foundation. And let me not do all the talking about your foundation. Could you start, please, and give us a brief history about how we got here from there?
Of course. Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure, Stephanie, to be talking to you. As you mentioned, being one of our first client advisors with Foundation Source. This is really cool. So thank you for including us in this webinar. I can tell you a little bit really quick. The history of the foundation it was founded in 1997 by my mom. We're a very small family foundation. She passed away in 2007. And at that time, I took over as president with my brothers and my aunt, her sister, on the board. So that's it. It's just us. And for most of our history, we were a traditional grant maker. And like Stephanie mentioned, we joined Foundation Source in 2008. And then I think, Stephanie, you were the one, you referred me to Foundation Source's Executive Director Institute. I believe it was you.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and that was huge. So I attended that, I believe it was 2012. And
Sounds right.
that really set us on a course to be where we are now, which is more strategic. And we are now focused on, like you mentioned in your introduction, on building the capacity of nonprofits through our various initiatives. But yeah, it was that. I really was thinking about that Executive Director Institute, Stephanie, really was a turning point.
That is so good.
Yeah,
that was great. I'm so glad you participated in that, and that it was a linchpin for you all. Actually, at this point, I'm going to turn it to Matt, because Matt, you're part of the evolution of the foundation, and I think probably your hiring maybe solidified and cemented the direction of the foundation. What's your background, and how did you end up with the Claire Rose Foundation?
Sure, thanks, Stephanie. Well, I'm the founder and executive director of a creative youth development organization and ran that for 16 years. And after 16 years, I made the decision to make the founder transition for two reasons. One was burnout and exhaustion. but I also want to change the things that were making me burnt out and exhausted. You know, the broken nonprofit and philanthropic systems. And Anna and I, so the Claire Rose Foundation was a major investor in that organization. And over years, Anna and I had a lot of discussions around what was broken and a lot of the frustrations. Around the same time, I was being called into a number of national conversations on how to strengthen the field of creative youth development. It was funded by the National Endowment of the Arts, brought together around 200 national leaders, because most of these organizations are small, community-based organizations, typically in low-income communities of color, and money doesn't traditionally flow down to them. And so what came out of that, it was like 2 years of discussions, produce a blueprint. And it's the National Blueprint for Creative Youth Development on how to strengthen the field. And so on 3 pillars. One is professional leadership development and technical assistance. One is on documenting and communicating outcomes. So that's evaluation and storytelling. And the third one is around what I like to call it like growing the pie. So engaging more funding and funding sources in the field, but also a heavy focus on advocacy and policy change. So when I made the announcement that I was going to leave my organization, I was having dinner with Anne to let her know, kind of, and she's like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to do this work. I want to implement this blueprint." And she's like, "Well, how are you going to do that?" I'm like, "I don't know." I'm like, "I don't want to start another nonprofit. Maybe it'll be a consultant." We're just, and then, like halfway through the dinner, she's like, "Hey, let's do it together." She's like, "I've got money, you've got the expertise and the connections," and that was that. And so, and then we kind of. That's what set us on the way. And that was 3 years ago, 2017. So
could you just give us a quick sentence for the audience who may not be aware? Because I know for me, it was the first I'd heard of creative youth development. I mean, it's even known by an acronym. So could you just give us like a quick sentence on what that actually is?
Yeah, sure. I guess the simplest way to explain it is that it's using the arts and creativity to achieve youth development outcomes. So it's not just arts education. Basically, programs are intentionally designed and centered on the arts, but also provide the students in the programs academic support, counseling and mental health services, college and career planning, leadership development, and civic engagement. So it's a wraparound services centering it on the arts, right? The arts is the hook, and they're all being provided with all these wraparound services. And creative youth development are really centered on 3 values: centering youth voice, so expression, giving young people their voice, racial and social justice, and then collective action. So that's creative youth development, and it's a newly coined term. It was just coined maybe in 2014. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I'm not so behind as a former theater major. As you mentioned, Anne, early on, this trust-based philanthropy. What is that? Would you define that for us? And is that a term that describes a particular movement, or did the Claire Rose Foundation coin this phrase?
We did not coin it. It's just, it's funny. We worked this way. I didn't know that it was a thing. I didn't know that it had a name. You know, it just was the way that my family and I have run the foundation just instinctively. We work. I mean, really based on trust. We build relationships with people like Matt and leaders of the organizations. And like Matt said, we always had the attitude of, you know what, we have the resources, but they have the expertise, and we trust that. So, but it is an actual thing now, and it is a movement, and so I feel like we were kind of on the forefront of that a little bit without even realizing it. But really, it's based on building those relationships and just keeping things, you know, working on general operating, minimal reporting requirements, just making it very much of a partnership and not you know, a burdensome process, but really because we do have such close relationships with our grantees that we can operate that way. So yeah, but it is a thing.
Thank you, because I saw it referred to in capital letters and wasn't sure myself whether that was a thing or whether it was a special and particular an initiative of Claire Rose, and I think it sounds like both. Matt, I'm going to return to you because to pick up on where I also saw something in writing, you are quoted in national and local resources as saying, "We need to continue our push and focus on systems change. We are treating the symptoms while we are trying to change the systems that cause them, both philanthropic and government. How would you say trust-based philanthropy plays a role in systems change?
Yeah, so I mean, so basically all the work that we're doing as nonprofits and foundations are addressing issues that were created by the conditions created by systems, right? Broken systems and systems that are inequitable, right? So I'd say it's a yes and. So you have to be treating the symptoms while you're also trying to dismantle the systems that create those symptoms. And so trust-based philanthropy is one of those, right? Philanthropic systems have been built historically like inequitably, right? And not pointing fingers at anybody, but it's just the reality of how philanthropy is done. It's very, even the process is very inequitable, right? Anne was just mentioning relationship-based. So in philanthropy, for us, it's more about conversations than applications, right? So trust-based philanthropy is a systems change initiative, right? So trust-based philanthropy is based on like maybe 5 core principles: multi-year general operating, unrestricted support, simplifying and streamlining paperwork, whether it's applications or reporting, right? The onus is on us to do the homework. We need to get proximate to the work. We need to really know who's doing this work, who do we not know about, really get really proximate and really know the field. That onus is on us, not on the organizations to prove it to us or tell us, right? Being transparent, responsive, open, honest communication, and deep listening without judgment, always soliciting feedback, and support beyond the check, right? As a small family foundation, we've got limited resources. So where we add value is being a connector, being thought partners, advisors, and using our platform to amplify the work of our nonprofit grantees. So there's a lot of different systems that need to be changed, both on the nonprofit side, on the philanthropic side, and in civically and in government. But that's just one example of philanthropic structures and systems that can be easily changed.
And I know that all of this, everything we've just talked about, has coalesced really intentionally and intensely during the COVID pandemic as it got underway. And Matt, you shared with us a really awesome white paper and article in preparation. And I know that the foundation actually broke down its response to COVID into 2 different phases, phases 1 and 2. I'd like to really pivot to get a little bit more granular, specifically about the Grants to Individuals project that seems to have been formally titled Frontline Fund and is described as being an emergency relief for teaching artists. What is this program and what sparked the idea?
Well, to be honest, like we created the Frontlines Fund before COVID in response to what we were hearing from our nonprofit partners. So as part of our effort to like build the capacity and strengthen the field, what we were hearing was that there was extreme toxic stress, anxiety, and burnout within these organizations, especially for those teaching artists that are working directly with young people. And most of the young people that they work with are facing some sort of trauma. So like, okay, why don't we create the Frontlines Fund? It can be a self-care fund to help sustain these leaders, these teaching artists and staff, so that they don't burn out and then leave organizations. And then, so that was like January, February. Then March obviously hit, and immediately so the way we listen to organizations, like we meet with them monthly. It used to be around a table for about 3 hours every month. We pivoted and went to Zoom calls every week, every Friday at 10 o'clock, and just to listen. And one of the first calls was like, okay, just as everybody else was doing, we're trying to get our bearings, but the thing we heard loud and clear, their greatest need was for the teaching artists, that they were the ones that get paid the first to go, get paid the lowest wages, are the most vulnerable. So that's where like, okay, how can we start reallocating funding? So let's take that Frontline Fund and turn it into this emergency response fund. And that's when we turn to foundation sword, like, how do we do this? What's the best way to give directly to individuals and the most legal way to do it, right? Are there any like, and that's when you enlightened us around this ability around hardships and disasters. So that's kind of the route we took with that.
Thank you. I know that we're starting to get a little bit short on time, so there are just 2 quick questions if we can. I feel like we could just, this is what it was like, audience, yesterday. We just had the best time preparing, and I know we could continue talking with these folks for just, hours. But Anne, I know Was this the first time actually that the foundation made grants to individuals? And
the first time that we established anything formally. We've done it a little bit by giving to organizations, but then to sponsor young people and staff to attend conferences and professional development, things like that. But we have never established a formal process like this. And like Matt mentioned, it was thanks to our client advisor at Foundation Source who helped us to establish this and quickly. That's the thing, we did this so fast. I was thinking about this yesterday after our preparation, that we were able to make, what was it, 42 grants or something, Matt, in like a week or something. And yeah, it was great. It was amazing the way it happened. So
anything
like
that
to
you
do
learned?
more of it.
Would you? So you learned that? Yeah.
Yeah, we would like to do more of it. I think I can speak for Matt that we would like to do more of this. It was definitely, I mean, like we've mentioned, we are very small. We have limited resources, and this was a way of getting a big bang for our buck. You know, these were $500 to $1,000 grants that made an enormous impact. And we heard from these teaching artists. You know, we've got letters, and we know them, and it was you know, like I said, a way of really making a big impact with a small amount of money. And so I know we would like to do more of that. And is there a way to do it without it being a hardship? You know, this is the whole thing I think about systems change and the way the system is set up now with the IRS. You know, it isn't something we can typically do, but it is a very effective way of making grants. So I don't know, Matt, if you have anything to add to that, but I definitely think that we want to do this kind of thing again.
Okay. Heads up, Katie Becker, Senior Director, who's
Yeah,
the private
Katie
client
Becker.
advisor for the Claire Rose Foundation. And Jana, too, you'll
Yeah.
probably get tapped along with your staff. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your perspectives and your input. Audience, we are, I'm going to move on to the third tactic here, but if you do have questions for Matt and Ann, please drop them into the question section, and we'll find a way to either address them this afternoon or get you answers as follow-up. So thank you so much. Matt and Ann have agreed to answer questions, for us to facilitate that back and forth after the webinar. So thank you again. I am going to move on to our final concept, which is scholarships. Private foundations can fund scholarships and fellowships in two different ways. For some foundations, it's enough for them to fund an educational institution and allow the educational institution to administer the scholarships, including selecting the recipients, facilitating the payments. Sometimes the foundation can provide certain parameters, like, perhaps the foundation wants to provide scholarships to first-generation college students. You can usually name the scholarship after the foundation, and with the end institutional grantees facilitation, you may even be able to meet the student beneficiaries. And for many foundations, this is plenty and enough. For other foundations, though, they like to have an even more direct connection to their scholarship programs and to actually select the recipients individually themselves. That program is one of those strings attached programs that requires IRS approval before embarking on the program. And it has to adhere to the general requirements of a grants to individuals program that we reviewed earlier. Hi, Jana. At this point, it was perfect timing. Quite literally, I finished my remarks and was about to ask you to join us. It's possible that many of you already know Jana, either our current clients or perhaps even some of the existing foundations checking out Foundation Source in prospective discovery conversations. She's the team lead for our private foundation tax attorneys and is often called upon for her expertise. Jana, in addition to those general requirements we reviewed earlier, what are some of the differences and maybe nuances, in fact, that present themselves between a grants to individuals program for alleviating hardship, such as that which the Claire Rose has embarked upon, and those made for scholarships or fellowships?
Sure. Hi, Stephanie. It's a wonderful pleasure to be here. So the differences are first, obviously, the purpose. When you're dealing with the alleviation of hardship, there needs to be an imminent need. There needs to be a hardship. There needs to be some sort of disaster or outside force that is causing the person to need help from the foundation. That's not always the case for a scholarship program. You can choose to give scholarship grants without having any financial or other hardship component as part of your program description. Also, the biggest difference is, as you alluded to a number of times, the need for advance approval from the IRS. Grants to individuals for the alleviation of hardship or in response to a disaster do not need that advance approval. When you're making a grant for scholarships or other educational or travel purposes, you do need to describe your program to the IRS and get approval before you can start making grants.
Why? Why do they distinguish one from the other, and why is the latter one require this additional oversight?
Well, there's no one black and white answer, but the general concept is that the private foundation is not supposed to present an opportunity for impermissible private benefit to any one person. And the IRS has decided that being relieved of poverty and suffering is not an impermissible private benefit. But the opportunity to pursue education or travel could potentially be an impermissible private benefit if the private foundation is not following the guidelines that the IRS has set out for making those types of grants, such as making sure it furthers a charitable purpose, making sure that people are selected in an objective and non-discriminatory way, and making sure that private foundations are committed to the oversight, that funds are being used appropriately, the reports are collected, records are kept, etc.
So I know it can be a fairly involved process, and I think I'm going to ask you to describe that process through the lens of a particular private foundation client that I know you've walked through. For the record, everybody, we're not going to be mentioning client names here in this section. That the clients we had invited to join us were all on vacation and unavailable. So they have given us permission to describe their programs without naming names and particularly identifying details. So Shauna, shall I repeat or ask anything differently?
Happy to jump in. And actually, building scholarship programs is one of my favorite things to do with our clients, because we get to hear so many different stories about why these programs matter and what the scholarship is supposed to accomplish. And it's so rewarding. One example I can use to talk about the process is a foundation client that's been on board with us for about 7 years. And a couple of years into their existence, they decided that they wanted to put together a scholarship program. We helped them build their application for advance approval. And the process is really designed to make the foundation describe their program, describe what they will be trying to accomplish, how they will be trying to accomplish it, and doing so in enough detail so that the IRS can understand your program and that you are going to follow the rules. So this particular program is designed to benefit students at one particular high school who will be pursuing a degree in either the STEM field or economics. And at the end of the program description, we landed on the foundation would be making about 8 grants per year that could be renewed for up to 4 years. So the whole 4-year college degree program. And the total scholarship amount would be about $40,000, as long as the student decided to continue to pursue the STEM or economics degree and continue to meet certain achievement milestones that the foundation set. Now, this foundation in particular decided to build in a lot of interaction with the students. They required regular progress reports, even more so than the IRS's baseline. And from what I understand, this foundation has developed some seriously significant relationships with the grantees that they've accumulated over the last 7 years, just even after they are no longer obligated to tell the foundation how and what they're doing. They continue to reach out and, really let the foundation know that they would not have been able to do the things that they had the opportunity to do with their education and their careers, but for the foundation stepping in and really providing this substantial support.
That is awesome. I think that's it. Could you speak in broad strokes about this particular foundation? You said it was a couple of years in. Did they know they were going to do scholarships when they first started? Do you remember?
So when they first started, they weren't sure.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the questions on the 1023 application for
Mhm.
recognition of exempt status. And this foundation, had the idea, I think early on, they were making grants to support educational initiatives, but not actually operating their own program. And then just decided that it wasn't enough. Honestly, they wanted flexibility in order to be able to respond more directly to the needs of the students, which is actually something that they did with this program. When it originally started, there was an internship requirement where part of the money had to be used for the foundation's internship program. And they ended up removing that requirement because it was too burdensome, because not everybody would get college credit for that internship. So they adjusted based on the needs of their students.
Jana, I'm looking at time and we only have a few minutes, so I'm actually going to skip right to one of our ending questions. We had hoped, audience, to have the opportunity to share another anecdote about a private foundation that came to Foundation Source with an approved scholarship program already. And they take a very different angle. They are much less restrictive as far as entry eligibility, and they really do focus on underserved, kids that are in poorer areas, particularly minority students. That foundation has made over $2 million worth of scholarship grants. I'm sorry we don't have the opportunity to talk about that, but the reason I'm skipping, Jana, is because you have a particular direct connection to the Foundation Source Charitable Foundation. And let me not do the talking here, but one of the things I think, if you could just spend just 30 seconds sharing with us, how is the experience different? Because I think it's going to be illuminating for our audience. For you as someone associated with the foundation, how does it feel for you to walk a foundation through the application for the IRS approval, advanced approval, being so tightly connected to the foundation itself rather than in a more of an advisory capacity?
Sure. So, I mean, as I said, my favorite thing to do is help foundations build scholarship programs because you get to see so many different things. We have clients that give scholarships to children who have suffered the death of a parent. We have, I mean, any reason to set up a scholarship program, someone has probably thought of it. And if not, then I hope they do and come to us and ask us to help build it. It's fantastic. Foundation Source's foundation program is so rewarding because we got to build it, with our colleagues, and it's going to benefit the community that our Connecticut office is based out of. And I hope to actually serve on this selection committee. I know it's going to be open to Foundation Source employees to sit and be part of the selection process. And I just think that it's so rewarding to see, my colleagues and the people that run Foundation Source really looking at our community, seeing a need, and dedicating time and resources to building not just a program that's going to throw money at a problem, but thinking and being so intentional about what problem they want to solve and how they can do it in a really meaningful way.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I wish we had more time to talk here too.
Sure.
Christy, I know that we are just bumping up on time, and I'm guessing that we don't have any time for questions, everybody. I'm so sorry, but we'll get back to you. So I'm going to thank everybody on my behalf for joining us today. And then Christy, I'll let you do our conclusion here.
Yeah, well, thank you first, Stephanie. It was a wonderful and engaging conversation. We knew we were being a little bit ambitious in our content and having so many voices in this 1 hour, but I hope you all found it enlightening and engaging. And as Stephanie said, send us emails, call us. We will work through the questions that have been submitted and get back to you. And we're always here to be a resource and talk through your particular situation. So, and please, Anne, Matt, Jana, and Christine, please accept on behalf of Foundation Source and everyone on the call today, huge thanks for participating and for lending your voices. So we will be sending a recording of the webinar this afternoon to everyone who registered for the presentation. So keep that in your inbox, or keep an eye on your inbox. And as a reminder, there are 3 white papers on the specific programs we discussed today attached in the handout section of the GoToWebinar dashboard. You can download them now, or you can email us and we'll get them to you. Just want to thank everyone for joining today. We extend our sincere appreciation to those of you looking for ways to assist others during this challenging time. And that concludes our webinar. Thank you so much.